What is up, everyone? Sean here, and here we are with another video. It's pretty much another follow-up to the EVO 2018 lineup reveal that happened very recently as I record this, and I actually wanted to just talk more about it, along with a certain game that didn't make it in there for this time around. And it's a pretty big game that came out not too long ago. It's one of the biggest fighting games out there in existence, or just in fighting game history, and that's Marvel vs. Capcom. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, to be more specific, of course. As we all know by now, it's not in there. It's we are lacking a Marvel vs. game, or versus a Capcom game, excuse me, for this EVO, and it's just really sad to see that something like this just has happened for Marvel vs. Capcom. This is coming from someone who grew up with Marvel vs. Capcom being one of their first fighting games in their little personal history with fighting games. I remember playing it, in the arcade, blah blah blah. I've kind of said my piece already with my Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite review, but just to briefly clarify, I grew up with it in the arcades, playing with it as a kid. I may have just mashed buttons or whatever, but that was my first big sploosh on crossover fighting games, and that's influenced me to really like these crossovers, or just ridiculous crossovers as time went on in gaming history, or just anything really, comics, whatever. But point being, I grew up with Marvel vs. Capcom, and it's just one of those games that I hold dearly to my heart. And we've seen Marvel vs. Capcom games at EVO for many years, including Marvel vs. Capcom 2, of course. That was like one of the biggest ones back in 06, 05, I believe, pretty much like the middle of the 2000s. And also Marvel vs. Capcom 3, of course, that was another big run during EVO, of course. It had its big run, including MvC3 and MvC3 as well, the Ultimate Edition, of course. And they had their amazing runs. Definitely a lot of history has been made with amazing players, and this time around, we're unfortunately not going to see that for this time around. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite made its release, its debut to the world, and it's done very, very poorly in comparison to other fighting games in history, especially with its, I guess, competitor Dragon Ball FighterZ. It's already been many folds, and it's already reached at least the lifetime sales as of right now for Street Fighter 5, if not more now, which is something I've kind of expected, and it still amazes me that Dragon Ball FighterZ reached to those numbers in the first place. And I think it definitely absolutely deserves all the praise and stuff that's been receiving from both the consumers and the pro players. I would like to make a video about Dragon Ball FighterZ with my impressions and review or whatever, but point being, it's a good all-around game. It's beautiful to look at, it's fun to play, people are into Dragon Ball, and it's just such a solid all-around game that it shouldn't be a surprise that it made it to the EVO lineup. But this is about Marvel vs. Capcom here, and again, it's just really sad to see, really sad to know that we are missing a Marvel vs. Capcom game at EVO. I think this is the very first time in at least a very long time anyway, that we are missing a Marvel vs. Capcom game at EVO, especially with Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite around. But yeah, it is very understandable as to why it's not there. Joey or Mr. Wiz made his point. It's a great game, but it's just not ready to be that showcase game at EVO. EVO, like I've said before, it's kind of like the Super Bowl of the fighting game tournaments. Even though some may say that there are other tournaments that may run better than EVO itself, but fact of the matter is, a lot of people watch it, a lot of players participate. It brings in a lot of numbers still, and with that, it's still probably the most popular or well-known fighting game tournament out there. And you know, it's understandable as to why they, you know, decided to put MvCI on the bench for now. They gotta you know, cater to what brings them the numbers, and MvCI just seems to be lackluster as of now. And you know, reason being, of course, obviously, is one, the aesthetics. It looks ugly. It still looks ugly to this very day. You know, they haven't done anything else to the game. There's been one big patch and then maybe another small one, but nothing really on the visual side. Of course, they haven't really done anything to it, and they've said nothing when it comes to Capcom Cup, or the Capcom Pro Tour, which is what leads to Capcom Cup, which is another big fighting game tournament from yours truly, Capcom. They've only catered to Street Fighter V. It's still, you know, I would say the biggest esports fighting game out there for right now. It's definitely getting the views. It's, you know, they are pushing Street Fighter V so far as to putting it on ESPN, blah blah blah. You get the point. It's getting all the treatment. Meanwhile, MvCI is just in the back, just sitting there, sulking all the hate and misery and the critiques and all the criticisms, all the hate, all the failures that's being pointed out, all the call-outs, everything. And it all just leads to aesthetics. It all leads to the lackluster roster. We are just not seeing the characters we want to see in that game. We haven't seen the X-Men. We haven't seen Doom. We haven't seen Wesker. All the charismatic characters have not made their return, and I think that they definitely deserve those returns, right? And of course, we haven't seen really like anything exciting in that roster, including the new characters, right? X is just not enough. Jeddah is cool and all, but it's just still not enough. We need more new characters, especially on the Capcom side. Especially with, well, Marvel had its fair share of new characters. So I think Marvel is okay, other than the X-Men. But Capcom is just really lackluster, in my opinion. Exciting thing that's, you know, on top of my head is X. Mega Man X, of course, and Jeddah. And not to mention that, you know, we only got one Capcom character, Sigma, for DLC. So it is currently in a state where Marvel is just dominating the Capcom side right now. It's just such an odd state, such an odd balance for the game to be in right now. And Capcom is doing nothing virtually as of now. It's, you know, it's just so sad to see this all kind of happen. But what would have happened, let's just say, if Marvel actually made it in there, and not Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball FighterZ or, you know, anything else really? What if Marvel took the slot of something else? You know what I mean? I think that would cause as much hate as the game not being in there. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? If not more, really, because look at the way the game is right now. Look at the roster. Look at what all the other things it's lacking. It's just such an ugly game to look at. You're gonna have more people looking at it than people playing it. That's a fact. That's like, you know, that's like a no-brainer. So more people have to deal with how the game looks, and then the people who actually play it. The gameplay is fine. It's absolutely fun. But from someone like me, I can't get back into it because of the way the game looks, the way the game presents, the way the roster, how the roster is. it just doesn't bring back enough excitement for me to reel me back in. I know a few people within my circle that are really into the game, and I understand why. The gameplay is just so fun. Personally, for me, I really can't. I really fucking can't. And it just, I think that translates over to EVO, where it is right now, and it's not in the lineup because of the aesthetics, the roster, which are the two important things for fighting games. People say, you know, graphics shouldn't matter as much, and gameplay is really important. I think everything is important. And story is important, graphics are important, the gameplay is important. When it comes to general games, anyway. When it comes to tournament games, the game has to look good, has to look fun, hype, whatever you want to, how you want to refer it to, and the gameplay has to be fun too and good. So, MvCI is just lacking a lot of those things except for the gameplay. And Dragon Ball FighterZ has everything in there. It's got the looks, it's got the popularity, it's got the big name backing it up, which is Dragon Ball, and it's got exciting gameplay. It just complements so much along with the aesthetics that we're seeing right now. It's just such a well-deserved, all-around great fighting game that's doing so well, and I think it deserves it. But another thing I wanted to talk about is that, you know, Marvel is dead. Oh, it's not an EVO, it's so therefore it's dead. I think people need to step back and really think about what they're saying, and especially, you know, people who are saying just because it's not an EVO, it's a bad game. You know what I mean? That's such a little blind comment, in my opinion. People need to kind of step back and see the broader side of things. And just because a game is not presented at EVO, it doesn't mean it's not a bad game. It doesn't mean it's dead. It's just that it's not a good enough showcase, or just doesn't bring in the viewership for whatever reason. And people, you know, numbers is what, you know, people favor. People who invest in stuff always want to look at the numbers rather than the cool sides of things. And so over time we've lost KI, we've lost MKX, we've lost now we don't even have King of Fighters. And look how it was last year, was 2017. That had a lot of exciting moments too, and those games are missing. So are people saying that, you know, KI, MKX, KOF, and all the other missing games that been in there equal to being bad games? Is that the logic that they want to go with? You know, that's such it's kind of like, I'm gonna be honest, it's a really dumb comment to say. It's a really dumb thing to say. Along with, oh, the game is dead. No, people are still playing it. The game is not dead, you know, by that logic, of course. So it's just not at EVO. That's just what it is. It's not dead. It's just not at EVO. There's always going to be other tournaments for MvCI or whatever game that you guys look forward to. And if you want to support those games, and if you have a chance to go out there and spectate or whatever, participate, either one, go out there. That definitely helps out the numbers, and it definitely keeps interest for other organizers to, maybe people want to see this game at this tournament and stuff like that. And you never know, you know, someday those games will come back. We've seen EVO Japan with KOF, so, you know, there you go. In fact, the matter is, you just have to support the game, keep it going by, you know, giving your viewership, giving your time, or just play the game. And you shouldn't just worry too much about, oh, the game is not at EVO. Oh no, just because EVO is that big fighting game tournament. You know, it's got that big brand name. You know what I mean? It carries so much business what do you call it? Business strength, if that makes sense. It carries so much of that brand, that fame, recognition, whatever, when it comes to fighting game tournaments, that, oh, if you're not at EVO, you're irrelevant, you're dead, whatever. That's not how it should be. That's not how it works, I don't think. I've seen so much of that yesterday. It just really wanted to make me talk about it. So usually I don't try to, you know, dive into drama or anything like that, but this is the only type of quote-unquote drama that I kind of am interested in, because it involves with fighting games, which is something I am passionate about. Even though, you know, I myself, I definitely don't consider myself good at all. I just have fun with these, you know, these games. I love fighting games. I love these titles and franchises, along with all the other adventure games and JRPGs and whatever the hell I talk about on this channel. I love fighting games, and that's why, you know, I you know, become passionate about these things, and it's just natural for me to talk about these things. And seeing those comments about, oh, MvCI is not EVO, so therefore it's dead, or it's not a good game, or whatever, it actually kind of brought out some fire within me. So I kind of wanted to make this video to kind of get that off my chest. So yeah, if you guys worry about, oh, MvCI is dead or anything like that, it is not, okay? And I think what's happening right now is that Capcom is kind of taking a step back, re-evaluating themselves, kind of have some recollection, some, you know, recovery, just to have time to think about what happened, what mistakes were made, and how they should approach things in the future. And I think, you know, we're gonna see probably a Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. I think that's like, it's gonna happen at some point, because they know that Marvel vs. Capcom is such a big game. People are gonna, you know, dive back into it if that's gonna be the case. They know that the aesthetics are the problem. They know the roster is lackluster. They know that, you know, whatever problems that's currently having right now should be fixed, whatever. But you know, it just makes sense altogether. You know, it's not in Capcom Pro Tour. It's not at EVO. So to me, at least, I think what they're doing is putting Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite at rest. For the major stuff anyway, especially with their own Pro Tour. And again, they're going to reevaluate, and they're going to sometime, you know, once they regather themselves, dive back into it, give it that fresh coat of paint, really change up the aesthetics, whatever, give it a new paint job, make it look good, make it exciting, along with a more juicy character roster for people to play with. Everything that should be there, it's gonna be there eventually. However, you know, it is such a wake-up call for Capcom, I believe. I think by now they should really take their time with their games, and not release these betas for $60 and then, oh, we get more content later. You know what I mean? I don't like this whole buy it and wait, you know, that kind of thing. I just want the game to feel complete, and I want that game to flourish, you know. And same thing happened with Street Fighter 5, but at least I guess that game is turning out well, a lot better, let's just say, than MvCI. Because you know why? Aesthetics. And when the game first came out, it looked good. The graphics were beautiful in comparison to Marvel vs. Capcom, because of one big problem: Marvel Cinematic. The Marvel Cinematic Universe was the big problem. They really wanted to push out this game to be around, at the same time be with the movies and stuff like that, to promote the movies. And I think Disney stepped in and really pushed these guidelines as well. So that's why I think the MvCI turned out to be the way it is right now. Along with the fact that X-Men is was a part of Century, and along with Doom, the Fantastic Four, Deadpool, of course. So we didn't have Deadpool, and several other characters, right? And from Marvel. So that's why all those things factored into a really weak game in terms of those. The gameplay is solid. I feel like the people who worked on the gameplay did their job, and I think it's fine that way. But all those other things gave them a hard time, and really they just weren't given enough time. They were really being pushed so hard, and I think they let that happen too. I think that's what Capcom kind of fucked up on, is the fact that they all kind of just let this happen just because they kind of probably wanted a quick buck or something. Just get it out of the way or whatever, just so they can please their investors, they can please Marvel, they can please Disney or whatever. And that's all there is to it. But I think what they really need to do is either, of course, update more of Capcom Infinite, or reevaluate themselves and just try to develop a game that's kind of within that genre, that 3v3 or 2v2 team-based fighting game, with hyper fighting game with just their own characters, because that way they can have their own control, they can have their own ways of developing it. They can just take their time to really fine craft it the best that they can within that budget, and I think that's the best way to go as well. I really, ever since Disney did buy 20th Century Fox, the possibilities of X-Men making a return to Marvel vs. Capcom is so possible, right? It's within reach. But in the back of my mind, in all honesty, I expect for this to not even happen. I think what this benefits really most is the movies. Disney looks at Marvel vs. Capcom with no faith, I think, or just a little faith comparing to the movies, because the movies bring in the money. They bring in so much in comparison to games, or these games anyway. And because of that, they just see movies as the bigger cash cow, and so they're naturally going to lean more towards the movies. So therefore, we're going to see the X-Men back in the movies for Marvel anyway, for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, sometime in the future, whatever. But when it comes to games, I wouldn't hold my breath on it. And Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is just going to have to work with the lack of the X-Men, probably. I hope to be wrong, but I think that's what's going to really happen. Given that how MvCI performed overall as just a game, for the consumers. But again, it all just winds back to Marvel vs. Capcom not being at EVO, and it's just really sad to see because of all these things I just talked about. The game is good. The biggest problem is all the other important elements for a good game, which is aesthetics, the art style, the graphics. Some of the characters look okay, like Ultron, all the people who have metal and stuff like that. Those look fine, I guess. But it's the coloring, the art direction, just color composition, and all the art, just the general art direction, the presentation, the menu, UI, how the game tries to build you up to the fight. Look at the versus screen, everything, all the aesthetics, all the important bits, everything you can think of for a fighting game is not there. Only the gameplay, which really shows that only gameplay is just it won't cut it. You need the game to look cool. You need to have the game look presentable. It needs to look cool, exciting, and just have people be attracted towards. people, you know, just see with their eyes, and if the game doesn't attract them, then you're not gonna have that viewership for the tournament. Which is why, again, these aesthetics, these things are so important for tournament games. You're not gonna attract the general eye if the game looks ugly, but the gameplay is good. But guess what? Those people aren't playing the game. How are they gonna feel about that? You know what I mean? How are they gonna feel that gameplay if they're not playing it? If they're just, you know, looking at it. You know what I mean? Which is why I emphasize that not only gameplay is important, everything else is as well. You need to hold those things closely, as close as the gameplay. This whole argument about gameplay versus aesthetics or graphics or whatever, I don't think that shouldn't be an argument. Everything is important. Everything. That's just how I feel about the game. So, I think that should be a good point for me to stop. I just wanted to get this out of my chest with MvCI, with EVO, which this time around EVO is just absolutely dominated by Bandai Namco, which I kind of failed to point out, and of course ArcSys. ArcSys and Namco are doing work. Look at their games: Tekken, Blaze Blue Cross Battle, Cross Tag Battle, whatever, and Guilty Gear. Look at Guilty Gear 2. You know, that's another game that's really cool to look at. The graphics look super stylish. You can just look at it, comparing to Marvel's Capcom Infinite. So again, it's just those other points is just so important for developing games. And this EVO, this definitely is going to be exciting, but it is a wake-up call. It should be a wake-up call for Capcom. The only Capcom game we are seeing, of course, is Street Fighter. That's a given. I think that's a game you are surely will see at EVO. So Street Fighter fans don't have to worry about that. But it is really, really sad for the fans of Marvel's Capcom, and especially all the players who've been working and grinding so hard for MvCI so far, just to hear that it's not going to be at EVO. You know, it is sad to hear that, because it is the biggest fighting game tournament, and they want to, you know, pour their heart out for that tournament. You know, to show themselves how much they love the game, how much they're good at it, and how much time they poured into it, their sweat, blood, and tears. And it's not going to happen. It's only going to, you know, happen at these other smaller tournaments, probably, hopefully, and they can do that as well. But you know, it's just the result isn't going to be as strong as EVO would be able to show that from these players, these MvCI players. So I think all those MvCI players are going to have to look into somewhere else, maybe, or stick with their guns. I'd commemorate for them for that. But I think few players like FChamp, Chris G are going to stick with Street Fighter for now. Of course, Justin Wong will probably stick with Street Fighter, but who knows? It does bring some exciting things for Dragon Ball FighterZ when it comes to the EVO side, anyway. And that's all there is to it. Again, I think this is a good point. Now is a good point to stop. And if you guys have any comments or anything like that, let me know down below about Marvel's Capcom Infinite, EVO itself, or anything related to those two. Leave me down below. I'd love to check them out. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. Again, always helps out the channel, and I highly appreciate it, guys. This was a big topic for me. I think it does really interest me when it comes to these kind of things. It's, you know, the only type of quote-unquote drama that I would probably get myself into. Just talking about, of course, I don't want to get myself involved with just by, you know, arguing with people and stuff like that. But I still would like to express my opinion about these things in these videos. So that's what the Hawke Talks is all about. Just me talking about things I am interested in, and including Marvel's Capcom, EVO, etc., etc., etc. So thank you guys so much. This has been my thoughts on this whole situation with Marvel's Capcom and EVO. Probably, I guess, a second discussion with EVO, I guess. But yeah, we'll have to see how Marvel's Capcom Infinite is going to turn out. Hopefully I'll get a big update with Ultimate Edition or something. I don't know. And we don't know what's going to happen with the rest of the DLC characters, whatever. But only time can tell. So until then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Sean out.